Okay, I want to go through chapter 16 now, and chapter 16 is what we're building towards because you're going to find it to be the most useful chapter for writing your essays. It's where you really get to flesh things out and really get a handle on eloquence and things like that in detail, in precision. And notice that we've built all along towards clarity and structures that give some kind of pattern repetitions and other things. And you're going to see that especially with this, with chapter 16, with once you understand conjunctions, is how to build something that's a little more eloquent and detailed. It is not, good writing is not about knowing big fancy words. That's a misunderstanding. That's what too many people think is good writing is about big words. It isn't. That just makes it look like it's been puffed up. So good writing is detailed and precise, and it uses adjectives and adverbs, but mostly at the level of phrases, but also at the level of clauses. And that's where conjunctions come in, and it's very important. At the level of phrases, you can flesh out your writing with prepositional phrases and give that level of detail and precision to it. And it's a simple stunt, and it's very effective to flesh out your writing, as prepositional phrases do that. Once you understand conjunctions, you'll understand how you can flesh out your writing with dependent clauses and relative clauses and things like that to make it more detailed. So let me go through how to use conjunctions. And there's two types. You want to keep in mind that there are two types of conjunctions. And I know most people think of and, but, nor as the only conjunctions, but keep in mind those subordinating conjunctions like when, because, if, since. Those are also conjunctions. They stick things together. Okay. And so the first ones are the coordinating conjunctions, the and, but, and, or. And so is a very useful one. Nor and yet, you don't use them very often. Yet means the same thing as but, and it sounds a little bit funky. Nor is just another version of or that you use in negative sentences. The vast majority of your conjunctions are going to be and, but, and, or, and sometimes you'll use so. Keep an eye on those, okay? Those are the most important. With the other conjunctions, okay? And you're going to use those conjunctions, by the way, with nouns. You know them from using simple nouns, apples, bananas. You just join them together. That's the glue that sticks them together. Okay, that's the simplest way to use coordinating conjunctions. And you can use them with prepositional phrases. And we're going to get to this when we get to parallels. So you join units together with the coordinating conjunctions, okay? And you can join two whole sentences together. It's up to you. We went to the park. That's one unit. That's one part of the sentence. And all of us played baseball for the afternoon. So that coordinating conjunction and is joining together, not park and all. It's not doing that. It's joining together. We went to the park, and then it's joining that to all of us played baseball for the afternoon. It's joining the two clauses together, okay? And this is part of the stylistic choices you're going to make when you're using coordinating conjunctions. You don't have to do this. You could do it if you want to, and maybe not, maybe so. But it's very important to understand that there's two primary units, and both of those units are clauses. The way the language works, English works, is it doesn't just string words together. What it does is it embeds whole chunks of language within other chunks. I don't like the analogy that you might often hear is that English is a string of words as if it were a necklace that's strung together. I don't think that one's good. I like Legos, where you put whole segments together of language. You can put prepositional phrases inside of an independent clause and then join it up with another dependent clause within another independent clause. You embed is what you do. You embed segments of language. Those units of language, the word, phrase, clause, can be embedded within other units of language, other words, phrases, well, obviously not inside of a word. You can put phrases within clauses. That's how the language works more often, okay? So, and these are all choices. These are choices you make. Subordinating conjunctions, and these are conjunctions. They are cousins of and, but, and or. They are words like after, before, so that, whenever, although. Notice these aren't fancy words, but these start off dependent clauses. Because, since, when, while. Those are all subordinating conjunctions. They are going to work like glue or tape and join that dependent clause onto that independent clause. You've got to have that independent clause to have a sentence. Okay, so be familiar with these and use them all the time to flesh out your writing. Okay, so the one thing to be careful of is some of these words can bat as both prepositions, or they can bat as conjunctions. After can be both a preposition, or it could be a subordinating conjunction. Once it's in a sentence, it is either one or the other. Okay. If it's just in front of a noun and that's all it is, it's a prepositional phrase. After the party, that is a prepositional phrase. If I said after the party we went to, or after the party ended, now it's got a subject and verb. Party ended. That's a dependent clause. So if you have a clause, you have a subordinating conjunction. If you just have a noun and you can take that unit out, you have a preposition. Okay? So understand that all of these could be either prepositional phrases or subordinating conjunctions. How they function in the sentence is how you determine what it is. That's a little confusing. You can figure out the form from the function it plays in the sentence. Sometimes you figure out the function from the form. They overlap, they do, and it can be a little bit of a challenge. But these words can be prepositions or they can be subordinating conjunctions. Okay? But what you want to form and what you want to be able to form, and let me jump over to this one, are dependent clauses. And you want to be able to figure this out because this is one of the talents. And again, it goes back to what we talked about with chapter 3. And why are you wanting to learn about grammar? Because you want to function effectively in an academic and professional environment. You want to come across as knowing what you're doing. You need to be able to create dependent clauses. Clauses with because, since, although. Those create more sophisticated thinking, not big fancy words, but things like dependent clauses. Those are one of the tools in your toolbox. These are all independent clauses. Johnny and Bobo shop at the Clown Palace in Victorville. I know this, I've seen them there. Don't ask. Frenchie the Poodle believes that a good haircut solves most of life's problems. These are all independent clauses. Notice when you put a subordinating conjunction in front of it, it instantly becomes a dependent clause. When Johnny and Bobo shop at the Clown Palace in Victorville, that can no longer be a sentence. It's a dependent clause. It can't be an independent clause. Remember that definition of a sentence. You have to have the independent clause. You have to. Right when you add a subordinating conjunction onto that clause, it needs an independent clause. Okay? Or if I add because, I can do that at the start of the sentence, but I've got to make sure there better be an independent clause later on in the sentence, or I've got to add one before. Because Frenchie the Poodle believes a good haircut solves most of life's problems, that's a dependent clause. It needs an independent clause. All of us are going to the mall. That's an independent clause. When Johnny and Bobo shop at Clown Palace, okay? Because she believes a good haircut solves most of life's problems, that's a dependent clause. Susie really is not dealing with the root cause of her difficulties. That's the independent clause. Once you have a dependent clause, you must have an independent clause. That's right here. So the ability to create dependent clauses is very important, but you must be able to distinguish between a dependent and an independent and make sure you have that independent clause there. Susie really is not dealing with the root causes of her difficulties. That's the foundation for that sentence. All of us are going to the mall. That is the foundation of the sentence. This adds on to it. That's the dependent clause. The because she believes, that's the dependent clause. In each case, the dependent clause is functioning as an adjective. That's what that whole phrase, excuse me, that whole clause is doing. That's what it's doing. Okay? So that's dependent clauses. And again, it's an incredibly powerful tool. And once you have it down, adding a dependent clause to an independent clause, that's what you'll do in your middle and later draft stages. In the early draft stage, you should be writing your independent clauses out. That's what you're going to be doing mostly. You're sketching out your ideas and you're nailing it all down on independent clauses. That's the backbone. In the middle draft stage, you're going to be fleshing things out with dependent clauses and prepositional phrases. That's what you'll be doing. Those are the tools you'll be reaching for in your toolbox. Okay? So that's, if you have those conjunctions down, you've got a good handle on things. Relative clauses, I find these aren't absolutely essential to good writing, but they make life a little bit easier. Those who, which, those who, which, and that clauses, they can allow you to flesh things out a lot better. Okay, a fireman who rescued a cat yesterday showed up late to the station. Who rescued the cat yesterday? That clause, and it is a relative clause that describes the fireman. That's what it does. Okay, I could say the hero fireman showed up late to the station. The hero describes the fireman. If I'm talking to somebody who loves cats, hero will make sense. Okay, that's an adjective used in front of it. Who rescued the cat yesterday is an adjective, and it's in the form of a relative clause that shows up after the noun. I could either put a single adjective in front or a whole clause after, but notice it must be attached to my noun. So whenever you have a noun and you need to develop your sentence, look for who, which, and that, and try to flesh it out. Okay, so is that clear? I hope that's clear with it. It's a relative clause, and it can always be used to flesh out your sentence. Wherever you have a noun, like station or fireman, you can flesh out your sentence a little bit better. The best teachers who work at the school are in the math department. Okay, it's usually the English department, by the way. The who is describing the teachers. The children should put away the toys that fell on the shelf. That fell on the shelf describes the toys. That's what it is. Okay. The children should put away the fallen toys. Notice I could have put fallen in front of toys, and that would have been an adjective. The company recalled the cars which had the defective braking system. Which had the defective braking system describes the cars. So wherever you have a noun, add a who, which, or that clause to it, and bam, you've got a more detailed sentence. That's what I want everybody to be able to do, is adding clauses to your independent clauses to flesh them out. Okay? And let me get to the last bit, and this is on parallels. This is the last skill I really want you to be able to use, and I need to be clear about this. It's an optional skill. It's a stylistic skill. It's a choice you make because you want your sentences to sound more detailed, more precise, to have a little bit better rhythm. That's what parallels do. They add on to what you're doing, and they create a rhythm to your sentences. They add more detail at the same time as creating a rhythm to your sentence. And I've noticed over the years that once a student has this down, boy, they use it nonstop. They love using parallel structures. And I'll tell you this, as somebody who's read almost every book ever written, they work so well. They really do add eloquence to your writing. And they're a simple little stunt. A simple parallel structure is, I ate apples and bananas. I paralleled the nouns. But if you think back to your different types of units, you also have phrase units and you have clause units. I could parallel those units. The student ate red apples and yellow pears. Notice I'm paralleling my noun phrases. And you might think back to the different types of phrases. We had noun phrases, gerund phrases, prepositional phrases, infinitive phrases. You can parallel any of those types of structures. And now that you're aware of it, you will probably start seeing it in good writing. You'll see that they parallel things like the student ate red apples and pears. This one doesn't work so well, but this one does because it's a parallel of noun phrases. So the student ate red apples and yellow pears parallels the structure. The student ate red apples and pears. This is grammatically fine, but stylistically, don't like it. It doesn't work so well. Style is very important because it fleshes things out, and it does it with eloquence, okay? This is a parallel of prepositional phrases. We walked across the street and into the store. That's a parallel of prepositional phrases. And notice this is a stylistic technique. It is not required grammatically. So the end game all along has been to improve your style, to make it more eloquent and make it more detailed, not to pump up your writing with big fancy words, but to show you techniques that you can use to develop your writing in your middle draft stages and in your final draft stages. You could have had a sentence, we walked across the street. Well, in the middle draft stage, you can go, well, what else did we do? We walked across the street, oh, into the store, and why? To get some cold drinks. We add more detail with these parallel structures, and you can do this again in the middle draft stages. It's a parallel of prepositional phrases is what it is. It's not walked across the street in the sidewalk. It's into the store. Where else did we go? We walked across the street and quickly. This one doesn't work as well. This one works well because it's got a good parallel. This one doesn't work as well because it doesn't have a good parallel. Okay, so that's what I want you to see. People like good style that flows with very effective parallels. And it's excellent for developing simple sentences. We arrived at the airport. I could parallel the subject by having it Sue and I arrived at the airport. What else did we do? Sue and I've paralleled the subject, arrived at the airport, and now I can parallel the verb and unpack the baggage. Notice that we arrived at the airport has suddenly become, just with the technique of paralleling, Sue and I arrived at the airport and unpacked the baggage. Okay? And all I'm going to keep doing is paralleling. Sue and I arrived at the airport and unpacked the baggage for the trip to Borneo. I've added prepositional phrases. So suddenly that very simple little sentence, we arrived at the airport, over the process of writing and the stages of writing, I can suddenly flesh it out with parallels and prepositional phrases. Sue and I arrived at the airport late and quickly unpacked the baggage for the trip to Borneo. Notice that a simple sentence became a very detailed sentence because I have more tools in my toolbox to flesh it out. And suddenly I can develop things. Little sentences become medium sentences, become well-developed sentences. Not word by word, but with phrases and with clauses. You can develop them more. And those are what your mind works in, is not word by word. Looking for the right word isn't a good technique. I'm trying to flesh it out with dependent clauses, with prepositional phrases, with parallels. That is how you develop your writing, and you develop your writing into a more precise form that will come across as somebody who really knows what they're writing about. And you'll do that in your middle and later draft stages. You'll make, often people use them to join choppy sentences together. You can do that, and that's one way of doing it. The President of the United States made a speech on global warming. He agreed with most scientists. A few people disagreed with his policies. You can use it this way. The President of the United States agreed with most scientists and made a speech on global warming. A few people disagreed with his policies. Notice that these are all choices. This is grammatically correct. This flows a little bit better. Okay, so it just works better. The style is better. So you make your decision on style using the tools that we've gone over. The prepositional phrases, the coordinating conjunctions for parallels, or the subordinating conjunctions for dependent clauses. Those are the ways you make your writing more eloquent, more detailed, more precise, and you come across as knowing what you're doing in a professional and an academic environment. Okay? So that's the goal. Take care, you guys.